Hello, everyone. This is Chema González, curator of film and events at Museo Reina Sofía. I'm here with Kidlat Tahimik on the right side, the godfather of Filipino avant-garde film, and with Sara Nadal Melsió from New York University. We are hosting this conversation together, Museo Reina Sofía and King Juan Carlos I from New York University. Conversation with Kidlat Tahimik on the occasion of his exhibition in the Palacio de Cristal, site-specific installation that has the great title that Kidlat is telling us. I want you to...
The title?
Yes.
The title is Magellan, Marilyn, Mickey, and Padre Dámaso.
500 years.
500 years of conquistador superstars.
Okay.
Rock stars, sorry.
So Kidlat is explaining later on about that intriguing title, and we're seeing the images of that installation. It is very, very important for us because is the Palacio de Cristal was built in 1887 to host the colonial exhibition of Filipinas. It was pretty much the blatant exhibition of colonial thinking, and is the very first time a Filipino artist is invited to intervene in the Palacio de Cristal, and that was done very bravely by Kidlat, examining the origin and the background of those colonial narratives. Then the conversation is hosted by Sara Nadal Melsió, professor in NYU. She's also the organizer of this series of talks. And we want to thank AECID, the Agency of Cultural Collaboration, international collaboration culturally from Spain, and also SULO, the Initiative of Studies in Philippines of NYU. Also, a big thank you to everyone involved in the organization of this conversation, from Jordana Mendelssohn, the chair of the King Juan Carlos Center in NYU, Laura Turegano, and Raquel Jimeno, also, well, and everyone here. So when you want, it's a pleasure to have this conversation with you both. So be welcome.
Well, for me, it's quite significant that in this year, 2021, I'm here in Madrid to relive what has happened here about 130 years ago when the Palacio Cristal was built. And I'm honored that the Reina Sofía Museum has given me a chance to express our version of history. We have our version, the Islanders version, but let's talk about that later.
Well, congratulations for the show, and thank you, Chema, for the introduction. I will introduce Kidlat very briefly to our audience because he is absolutely a legendary figure, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page. So the director, actor, performer, and artist Kidlat Tahimik is the undisputed pioneer of Filipino independent and avant-garde film. Tahimik's self-reflexive and often satirical filmography and intermediate artistic practices take the form of an improvisational back and forth, where artworks reference the storytelling in his films, and the latter become open narratives under constant revision. Tahimik's installations and films present us with a critical entanglement between the personal Filipino traditions and knowledges and the country's violent colonial legacies. Something Tahimik himself has described as cinema's third way, a critical standpoint against capitalism's investment in the individual and in favor of a collective and shared struggle of the colonized. He has been honored in numerous festivals and with numerous awards, most notably the International Critics Prize at the Berlinale in 1977. He presented his first film, Perfumed Nightmare, the Prince Claus Laureate Award in 2018, and as an artist, the 2019 Sharjah Biennial where he presented the Stormy Clash Between Two Goddesses. He was the most critically acclaimed installation there. Among others, his filmography includes Perfumed Nightmare, Turumba, Baligbayan, Memories of Overdevelopment, and Wise Yellow in the Middle of Rainbow. His films are a bricolage of mixed media, footage, as well as objects that travel from one film to another, where cinema becomes a gift of movement across space, cultures, languages, histories, and temporalities. Kidlat, we would like to begin with a clip of your first movie, Perfumed Nightmare, 1977, the very beginning of the film, an extraordinary achievement that was produced with expired film stock. And we want to hear about it. It's really a recycling exercise. And Isabel, if you could cue the first clip that we have for our conversation. Thank you.
Ito ay ang tulay ng aming bayan. Ito ay ang iisang daan papasok sa Balyan.
This is the bridge to our village. It is the only way into Balyan, and it is the only way out. Our bridge is 3 meters wide and 10 meters long. It is our bridge of life. The Spanish soldiers built the bridge after destroying the original bamboo bridge built by my grandfather. Then the US Army engineers wanted to widen it for their military convoys, but they failed because of the strong winds of Amok Mountain nearby. The bridge is used by everybody. It is used by those who make big profits, and it is also used by those who make small profits.
Una akong tumawid nag-iisa nung
I first tried to cross the bridge alone when I was 3 years old.
Ako ay si Kidlat Tahimik.
I am Kidlat Tahimik. I choose my vehicle and I can cross this bridge. The bridge is also used by promoters of Miss Universe contests. Again, I tried to cross the bridge by myself when I was 4 years old. I am Kidlat Tahimik. I choose my vehicle and I can cross any bridge. The bridge is used by the leaders who promote discipline and uniformity. It is used also by the followers. It is our bridge of life. Today I am still trying to make that final crossing to freedom. I am Kidlat Tahimik. I choose my vehicle and I can cross all bridges.
Kidlat, I chose this wonderful beginning of your first film because it seems to me that it's very much allegory of your whole artistic practice. And I feel like we're kind of witnessing the birth of Kidlat Tahimik, not just as a character, as a filmmaker, and also an archive of the global South, but also this fact of being more than one thing at once and in multiple times, and with the weight of history pulling the weight of history behind you. So I wanted to please tell us about this beginning and how did you become Kidlat Tahimik? You weren't born Kidlat Tahimik, you became Kidlat. How did that happen? You got to see it in film.
Well, when I started that film, I named the character Kidlat Tahimik. And maybe because I worked on it for 2 years, fast forward, fast backward, I eventually felt I was Kidlat Tahimik.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remembered now. I remember 1 year after I started making the film, and I was doing this in Munich, in West Germany at that time. I finally got Werner Herzog to sit with me at the editing table to watch this footage. And at that time, this was my first film, and I don't know, I was sounding very. I remember those first scenes. I was saying, to cross your bridge is to choose your vehicle. And when Werner Herzog saw it, said, "Why don't you just say, I am Kidlat Tahimik, and I want to cross this bridge?" And that was a key for me to, why not talk like I am talking to you?
Yeah.
And it became my beginning.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, the bridge was just as I told the workshop class, it was not in any script. By the way, there was no script when I made Perfumed Nightmare. Yeah, I had a rough beginning and a rough middle and a rough end. But the bridge in my father's hometown was beckoning to me and say, "Hey, I want to be in your film. Just shoot me, and let's find out when or how or which way you're going to use this scene." And I did that, and just over the weeks of working on the table, I started to develop lines about somebody wanting to cross the bridge and get out of his old world into the exciting world outside.
But I also feel that repetition is an important technique in your filmmaking. I wanted to go back a little bit, even before Perfumed Nightmare. Your first intervention in cinema was as an actor for Werner Herzog's The Enigma Gaspar Heuser. And in there, you play a character, Hombrecito, which is already a character that just by being there deconstructs the entire premise of the culture of the film and the period that Herzog is talking about. So I wonder if there's a connection between playing Hombrecito as a fictional character for the Herzog film and becoming Kidlat Tahimik, and this gift of a storytelling that changes the way we perceive the history we think is stable. Does that make sense to you?
It's interesting how you framed that scene. Okay, I was playing Hombrecito, and I remember I'm supposed to be wearing many layers of Western clothing, so that I think according to Werner, when he described my character, it was a way to protect myself from, I don't know, maybe from the colonial vibes. But the thing is that he also let me, the lines that the circus meister says is that I have to keep playing my flute to keep my tribe alive.
Yeah.
I guess, for a long time, I just thought that I had just played the role, and wow, it was an experience to work with Werner Herzog. But maybe now, since you mentioned this, maybe it's been 42 years since I've been, I mean, almost 45 years. But actually, when I did that role, it was a little seed, maybe a new DNA that was implanted into me, which gave meaning to the, you see, I was born in Baguio, which is a colonial hill station. So it became an American enclave of modern culture, right in the middle of a very rich tribal culture. And I think this combination, while the Western thing was like suppressing it, denying it, you're not, come on, don't be a heathen, don't be a backward, primitive, try to be like us in New York. I think this kind of struggle in my mind would only come out when I started making that film. And then I saw the value and maybe even the line of the Circus Miser that I have to preserve my culture became of an important aspect of my filmmaking. And up to today, it's, yeah, I go to the mountains of the tribes and I've lived with them. And here I feel I have, at the Palacio Cristal, I've been able to invite back the spirits who 130 years ago were displayed as exotic species in the Palacio Cristal. But instead now we've brought them back. We played our gongs. We danced at the Palacio Cristal last week. And I think we have got them to come back again. And now they're on their way to Glasgow to help save the planet.
That's wonderful that they're going to Glasgow. Speaking about these spirits, I wonder about where they live and your relationship to objects. Today, you just mentioned that the bridge spoke to you. The next film that you did was about who invented the yo-yo as a sort of Philippine object. But it seems that objects play a very important role in your filmmaking and in your art practice and in your performances, because they are once talismanic objects, but they're also products of improvisation. They are objects like, for instance, there's a wooden horse that your mother makes out of the butt of your father's rifle that you carry around. There is the bamboo camera that you use, that we titled the talk, to film with a bamboo camera. There is all these objects that somehow seem to preserve something that seems to be detached from the commodity culture that, as you often say, has invaded the entire globe. So I wondered if you could speak about the role of these objects in your film practice and how they become, characters of their own, how they, there it is. It is the most wonderful camera I've ever seen. Tell us about it.
Bamboo camera.
It's wonderful.
It's interesting that in recent, whether it's reviews or trying to frame Kidlat Tahimik for an exhibition here in Spain, it's come up more and often that there are certain objects that become a signature maybe of my film. Now, I guess because I didn't study filmmaking in any formal way, and also because I really make all my films except one without a script, maybe the need to have an object becomes a interactive process that allows my story to move forward. So the yo-yo is, most children have this little object and it's fascinating. But then when I got it into a more of a political, technological frame, that maybe this involves scientific principles that got the first man on the moon. I'm sure the scientists will lynch me for this, but it's a quack-like theory. But because I can play with these objects, it advances something that is trying to come out of my head. In other words, if I talk about the bamboo camera to artists and I say, okay, this bamboo camera is a symbol that we should shoot or tell stories from our point of view.
Right.
The bamboo camera is our indigenous material, and maybe my indigenous viewfinder is framing it with indigenous storylines, and therefore I'm less likely to be a copycat of Hollywood. So this way of storytelling makes me avoid the formulas of script writing, which I think a lot of script writers get hooked in, because it's what are the last successful films, and what are the elements that made it successful? Was it fast paced? Was it every 5 seconds, some exciting boom, boom, boom? This become the guidelines for hackers of scripts. And since I don't have a script, this is my script. Things, object trouvé that I find along the way.
So these objects that you find along the way sometimes also become, as you said, is a point of view of the global South. It is a point of view of subjectivity that is looking otherwise. And I believe after you did, your first film, you went Who Invented the Yo-Yo, and then you did Turumba as well. And then you had this long diaristic film that is Why is Yellow in the Middle of the Rainbow, that begins with a section entitled I Am Furious Yellow. And that to me seems to be your more explicitly political intervention. And it begins precisely with the role of objects and debris not in the Philippines, but interestingly enough, in the Navajo community in Monument Valley. And I'd like to talk about this beginning of this wonderful beginning of the film in connection to your bamboo camera. So Isabel, if you could cue that one, please.
In the Old West, before the multi-laned highways, covered wagons struggled along the dusty trails, daring to enter the realm of the unknown. In the land of plenty, junk gathers dust,
Or simply rusts
into dust. In the land of not so plenty, wipe off the dust, and what do you get? A rusty third world projector. Hey, what's wrong? Don't worry, it's not your set, folks. It's just my third world projector.
my third world projector.
Okay, so this wonderful beginning of I'm Furious Yellow seems to contain some of the elements you talked about. There's even a sort of mock approach to the idea of the screenplay where you keep feeding the lines to your son. And I wanted to talk about this decision to begin a film that will actually talk about people power and the movement for Corazon Aquino in the Navajo community in the United States, so that the third way is in the middle of the first world. I thought that was, you know, can you tell us a bit about this decision and the way you use debris and the poor image and this imperfect cinema that seems to carry this enormous political weight?
Actually, the footages at Monument Valley were not anyway integrated with something that would end up with throwing out a dictator from our country.
Yeah.
It was just a home movie that when my son and I did a cross-country trip, I took some pictures, and I remember actually I was driving cross-country from after showing my film at the Berkeley Film Archives, and the director then, Tom Luddy, said, "Hey, on your way, why don't you just stop by Monument Valley?" And the only clue he gave me was, that's where they shot Stagecoach, John Ford's Stagecoach.
Right.
And so I went there, and okay, I took shots, but take cute shots of my son playing there with no real plan how to use them.
Mhm.
But then later, as I also realized that, like the framing in Caspar Hauser,
Mhm.
that the Indians were again the bad guys. They were being put into a Hollywood frame, and that became a worldwide image that even when we were kids, none of us wanted to play Indians. We always wanted to be the cowboys.
Right.
And we didn't even realize that when the Lone Ranger calls his sidekick, Tonto, come over, Tonto. We didn't realize Tonto meant stupido. No?
Mhm. Yeah.
So it was already kind of a racist statement built into the dialogues of Hollywood, which throughout the world you pick it up and don't realize, hey, maybe it is implanting a certain image that these third world people are stupid or tontos.
Mhm.
And it was through this exercise of including it that I eventually developed a little soundtrack and some lines, and where even my son was just playing with his little, what do you call this, anyway, these toys.
Mhm.
And only at the editing table I created this dialogue which would reframe my original reason why I shot it. And I think this is where I have the luxury of time,
Mhm.
which allows me to distance myself from when and why I shot this footage.
Mhm.
And I can then, years later, be free enough to use it in another context, to give it a political frame, or
Mhm.
to give it some cultural significance. So Monument Valley, of course, was a very later, and with hindsight, was that kind of the colonization by Hollywood
Mhm.
in the world's mind, how the primitives had to be civilized by the Lone Ranger.
Right. Right.
The Monument
Fascinating.
Valley, well, I actually, in that trip, I befriended a Navajo family. And after that year, for 20 years, I would, on my way back home, I would always stop in Monument Valley, visit the Jackson family. By the way, the father earned his living by sitting on a horse at John Ford's Point.
Mhm. Right.
And I think that colonial concept
Yeah.
continues to today.
Right.
But that's what I learned by editing that kind of playful stuff.
Mhm.
And yeah, it gives a beginning to the flow of the film.
Right. And it's exquisite, like how you basically take Hollywood, you take on Hollywood through a home movie that you only later decide to incorporate. So there's a labor of like a bricolage, there's a labor of like improvisation and a capacity of seeing things in context at a later time. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of improvisation in your work. You've already been alluding to it, but it also seems like it's a sort of political stance that has to do with the question of possibility. Improvising is being able to see the possibilities in what's in front of you. And you have been developing this technique both in your film and in your artworks and your performances. So I wanted to talk about what does it mean, this capacity to improvise? How can we read these? I mean, how do you see these in connection to your critique of colonial violence, the colonization of the imagination through Hollywood, which has always been one of the things that you constantly have reminded us throughout your film career?
Well, Hollywood, I never thought of Hollywood as a phenomenon or anything. It was just, as a child, I just had my overdose of cowboy films and Jerry Lewis ha films, and I, maybe because of my evolution, I mean, I became an economist.
Yes.
I studied first world relations in terms of economic aid flow to our poor countries. All these were a total mix in my head when I suddenly just tore up my diploma. I tore up my MBA diploma.
From Wharton.
Yes. Wow, you've done your research.
Well, yeah, I worked there.
And
yeah.
when I tore it, was to burn my bridges. But I think I was also going to find a way to deconstruct or escape from a way of doing things, the efficient way of doing things, trying to optimize the return, usually financial, for an endeavor. And when I decided that I had enough of working in an office and maybe find my way into the art world, and actually I wanted to become a playwright at that time because my undergraduate studies was in theater. But then when I found myself questioning already from my beginning what kind of games I played, we had Monopoly introduced early into, and then my early books were about what was it, Dick and Jane. I think these are the same textbooks that American kids have when they're 7 years old. And then the Hollywood films, you're rooting for this kind of hero. And sometimes don't you realize, oh, maybe I should be, I'm closer to the enemy. The bad guy is not so bad after all. This melange in my head had to be turned over upside down and inward out until I found myself finding a language, and maybe starting with the objects, and then letting those objects be reframed on a soundtrack. And then sometimes, like in the case of the Yellow film, letting the anti-dictator movement suddenly take focus, but subtly going it from early children footages, school graduations, and the little boy playing in Monument Valley. So it took years to develop that, but I think it's because I said to myself, I'm not just staring my diploma, or I'm not just being conscious that I don't have a film diploma, but I'm just going to let what I call my duende, my inner creative spirit, find its own way. And since there's no producer to breathe on my back, hey, you gotta do it this way. Hey, we have a play date in 6 weeks. Hey, the banks are running after us. I think I've developed a total freedom to play with those objects, to play with those unrelated improvisical items, to let them help my duende tell the story. So it's a total surrender to, cosmic storytelling. But at least you avoid the formulas that maybe would give you a big fat bank account and buy you a Rolls Royce after your third film.
Right. Well, about this question of like, turning of your diploma, and like there seems to be a sort of a pedagogical project in your films as well. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the way that you use children. There seems to be always an audience in your films that is embedded in the film, that seems to be either learning or commenting on or open to the experience of film in a way that mostly adults cannot be. So I wondered, like, we just saw a clip where you actually use the questions and the attitudes of your own child. And I wondered this idea of including this built-in pedagogy that is not necessarily a pedagogy that is in any way about telling people what to think, but a pedagogy that is about questioning what's in front of you. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the use of children, even like the character of Kidlat Tahimik has some elements in him as a character in the films that is childlike. There's a freedom to him that I think has to do with that connection. And people sometimes have talked about naivete or like, you know, simplicity. I don't think your films are simple at all. But I do think that this question of introducing this point of view is key to the practice and key to the critique that you're formulating your film. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about this, about what do children mean in your films?
Okay, while you were asking the question, I just sort of, something that came to my mind that's like maybe naive paintings, no? And but actually, the people who do naive paintings first have to become literal good painters, and then afterwards try to break away consciously to become naive.
Right.
Was Kidlat Tahimik such a kind of a film artist that he eventually chose to let children's or the children's way of viewing the world become, if you say it's a signature of my films? No, I think, first of all, my children, I have 3 boys, and we developed they're like my gang too. And I found it interesting to be able to talk to them in a, I wouldn't say a low level, but it was at a level where their frequency and your frequency as a father can be a two-way, if you call it pedagogic way. I also became aware that to excite my kids with a thought or an idea, you have to reframe or to reassemble your words or to reassemble your questions so that it would, Now, if I were a seasoned filmmaker, I mean seasoned in the sense of the usual filmmaking, then I would say, oh, will that kind of structure help promote the film? Will it bring in more dollars? Will it make people talk about it at the beer garden? But no, I think it was just because I was playing with them that I developed. And then, of course, okay, it's as an independent filmmaker, I couldn't afford actors. So as you know from all my films that I'm the cheapest actor available. I am the most always on call. So even my last film about Magellan's slave, I could cast myself 42 years as the same guy. But having my children around gave me daily motifs and daily situations that they became my script writers, so to speak, or our ping pong of ideas between my sons and me led to my own questioning, and which I would throw maybe into the film track. And I'm always surprised how the audiences sometimes relate to that. But in the end, it's also because I didn't want to be what I call a clenched fist filmmaker who is angry about capitalism and imperialism and everything like that. But I could also bring it up in children's way of looking at the world. And if it is a sign that people are now patient enough, the audiences are patient enough to try this kind of banter and let it stay in their seats. Even in a film festival, you know, where a lot of people are impatient, they bang the doors when they go out with a lousy film. it was probably just a new thing for them, but for
Mhm.
me, it was a very normal thing. You know, this last film, my film about Magellan slave, which I took 42 years to make. But I remember that when they were still small and I would have to go with a bedtime story and tell them some story, I would improvise something about, oh, so Enrique de Malacca did this and he played around and jumped into the water, etc. And then it would become a sequence.
Mhm.
But because I found a way of sharing a visual or getting my kids to see their visuals, and maybe they would share with me something very different from what I had in my mind, but that would even suggest the next sequence.
Mhm.
So it became a dynamic because I said, I'm not going to get stuck in the cliches of adult conversations.
Right. Right.
Consciously or unconsciously, it was just a feeling. I'm
Right.
enjoying my daily banter with the kids, and if they find their way into the film, let it be.
Mhm.
So it just
Yeah.
grew into that way.
Right. It's quite wonderful because there's something about the conversations in the film, the way that you focus on culture as something that it is the words that we use to talk to one another, to express confusion, belonging, loss. That is the thing that produces the political and economic critique. So there's a sort of a beauty to the conversations you have with children. I'm thinking of, as again, I talked about I Am Furious Yellow as maybe your most political film. There's a wonderful scene where your youngest son, Nini, is you tell them, what film do you want to go see? And your child says, I want to see Rambo. And he points to the newspaper. And the newspaper actually has a picture of the massacre of January 22nd, 1987 in the Philippines. And you tell him, no, Nini, this is not a film. This is a newspaper. And in that moment, you basically bring together the critique of, cultural colonization as a screen for political and economic colonization. So there's a sort of beautiful way in which you do that. You often also use the way that children misunderstand words. So you have this very beautiful one where we're going to talk about your samurai movie, where one of your kids said the samurai sounds like samurais, or you have moments where you have benevolent assimilation becomes benevolent assassination. So what you just talked about is like the richness of that conversation, I think really is one of the exhilarating experiences when one sees your films. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that, right? You make a decision to make a political film that, as you say, is not about the closed down fist. And because of it, it is a much more nuanced, a much more mobile, a much more entangled understanding of our complicities in the political. So one of the things that I think as your films have been, circulating, we all realize is that if they are political films, they are political in the best possible way. And that includes the way you talk to children. So I wondered, the scene with the newspaper and the massacre is absolutely brilliant. And I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that. That's a perfect example of what you were talking about.
I like the way you have just described it. You find it jumps out as a political framing, and it has its meanings that can be understood by even hardcore activists and clenched fist types. And I have nothing against clenched fist films.
No, me neither.
I think we need those clenched fist films, and I just happen to wander along a path that I guess because I like being a child like my kids, and maybe I have remained at that level of communication. So a clenched fist film, I think, is very efficient in saying what is wrong with the world.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe if I'm saying there's something wrong with the world, it's just let's, instead of killing the ball, in ping pong, we're just ping, pong, ping, pong.
Yeah.
And the child banter is a way of letting that ping, pong, ping slowly sink into your audience. And maybe because they can identify with having been children before,
Right.
They end up, oh, maybe after, yeah, oh, of course,
Right.
because
And
they
it's
were
with
expecting something more direct and quick
Mhm.
and easy to understand.
Right.
And then you end up with cliche words and cliche isms, etc.
Right.
And I think a lot of people like to hear something which anyway conforms with their belief.
Mhm.
But sometimes if you come through the back door
Yeah.
with a childlike channel, I think it even comes out deeper, more subtle,
Yeah.
and they wake up. Huh,
Yeah.
of course.
Right. Yeah. That's very much the case. And you talk about these forms that return, like the ping pong, the yo-yo, the bridge, back and forth. And I think this sort of this labor of repetition and recontextualizing is very important to your practice. And I'm just also, in terms of children and other issues, there's one element of your films that critics have pointed it out, and I think it's kind of interesting. And that's a bit of a departure of what we're talking about now, is the question of the body, right? You were talking about the Western audience, the first world audiences looking at your films, and you have a very calculated, I wouldn't say calculated in a sort of, manipulating way, but an interesting use of the body in your film. Like, for instance, it's there and it creates a certain discomfort in some audiences. You use, for instance, in the first film, there is a circumcision scene, there is childbirth, later on there is breastfeeding, there's a self-flagellation during Turumba, there's the performances in the museums with indigenous clothing that some audience are uncomfortable about. I really find that the way that you use this, even the naked hairy bag of Magellan, the way that you use the body in your films is really interesting and it's really unexpected. I've been in cinemas watching your films, and there's always a moment where the body appears and it creates some sort of moment of reassessment. And I think it's kind of genius where you always put it in a way where nobody would expect it. And I just really want to know, how do you work with this? Because they are so perfectly positioned in the films, then it's the impression one gets is that you're putting there for a reason. So how do you use the human body in your films? And how is that used to disrupt a little bit of the comfort of the spectator?
Again, I don't know if I had any conscious line to make that a tool for communication. Mm-hmm. I think that, yeah, when the children in my film do their ordinary and natural thing, maybe I frame it to be a little bit more interesting. Mm-hmm. But with hindsight later, that body movement or that particular childlike action becomes something I can reframe in the context of previous shots and future shots. Mm-hmm. I remember about 4 years ago, I was invited to Korea for a film retrospective, and then there was a group of stage actors who found out I was in town and said, "Oh, can you speak to our group?" And I just said yes, and sometimes I say yes without realizing what kind of a group I was going to talk to. Like one time I accepted an invitation to cement dealers organization, and when I finally, day before, I said, "Oh, what am I going to?" Anyway, I realized that these people were expecting me to talk about acting, maybe from a filming point of view. And I asked myself, why are they asking me? And very often in the curriculum vitae, they always put director, filmmaker, culture warrior, and actor. And yeah, I'm only an actor because I act in my films because it's a cheap way to exploit myself. But I had to reframe because I had to think about it. And I know when people are talking about film acting, it's like, wow, it's the camera that will take a close-up and a change of angle and zoom in on the eye and that small twitch. is going to make that Oscar performance. I think they were expecting that kind of wisdom. And I finally said, you know, I'm really not that kind of a film actor. I think I just used my body as a prop to move the story to the next thing. So Enrique, the slave of Magellan, did this, tuk, tuk, tuk. He jumped into the water, chuck, chuck, chuck. This summation helps bring the story to this next point, but it's not that internal wrangling or the internal joy that the camera can zoom in. So I told him that it's in a way, maybe the way Charlie Chaplin also uses his body,
Yes.
or the jester does it to create impressions in the audience. But I see that as my my way of telling stories one step at a time. And since I'm most comfortable with my body, okay. Your other question about, okay, my thing about, sometimes I very often do performances with my G-string or loincloth. I think this one is more, well, any any Freudian psychologist will say, oh, maybe it's just an exhibitionist. But no, I really am like our, here at Reina Sofía Museum at the Palacio Cristal. It was important that, hey, our Igorot brothers who were displayed there 130 years ago to justify colonialism. See these primitives, see these backward people. We have to civilize them, we have to Christianize them. We have to prepare them for self-government, whatever colonial justifications you can have. But I also know at home, a lot of our indigenous people have become ashamed to wear their traditional wear because it is associated with being backward and associated with being from a pejorative. It's a pejorative image, and I think because my main advocacy over these years, and these are probably seen in the cultural thrust of my film, that it's always why are many Filipinos ashamed of their culture, or they always feel that they have to cow. And I think this has been centuries of colonial brainwashing. A Filipina writer, Chitang Nakpil, wrote, we Filipinos have lived 3 centuries in a convent and 50 years in Hollywood. That's a lot of mishmash, mix up people. And when you think about those clash between, let's say, the convent conservatism and the Hollywood, you know, let it all go. Maybe Filipinos are on this kind of, where do I belong to? It's what we call in our workshop a niha, niho, neither this, neither that. But maybe we have to accept that we have been hybridized by all those centuries of colonial influence, of cultural impositions on our culture. And if maybe the mixture can be an interesting thing too. We cannot go, I have to always specify to people who watch my performances or even study my advocacy, that I'm not advocating to go back to the Stone Age. But if we must, okay, we have to keep up with the world. We have to learn how to create livelihoods and to be able to harvest our rice before listening to the weatherman that the typhoon is coming. So these are all unnecessary part, but we don't have to be ashamed of our grandparents' harmony with nature, which I think the world today has lost. No, I mean, no,
Yeah.
if all the so-called first world countries listen to the voices of the indigenous people who
Mhm.
treated the trees as their brother and the river as their sister and all these elements of nature as part of ourselves, I think the world wouldn't be what it would be today. So it's understanding this relationship that has been lost within ourselves because of an over emphasis on the material progress.
Mhm.
And if that has become a central part of my theme, it's probably because the world is moving overly much in another direction. Maybe that's why we have coronavirus today and
Yeah.
global warming.
Mhm.
These are all signs.
Mhm.
Maybe, yeah, we must listen to the old man in the rice terraces of the
Yeah.
Baguio Mountains,
Yeah.
rather than always listening to Netflix.
But there's
other-
something, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. There's a bit of a delay. You said something very beautiful, which is there's a misunderstanding with your films. Like there sort of seems to be utopia in the past before colonization, which is not what you're saying at all. But I wanted to talk about this idea of the things that globalization has made possible in the case of a coalition between different cultures of the global South. And I wanted to show a clip of your very short movie in the terraces of Japan, the rice terraces. This is called Some More Rice. And I think that's a beautiful example of you at that moment are making a connection between the rice workers in Japan, the terrace workers in the Philippines. You're also talking about the Navajo community. So at the same time that globalization has destroyed some indigenous cultures, it seems to me that you're also proposing a sort of coalition where these different cultures in different parts of the world that would not have been connected see that they have something in common. So I wanted to get to that clip and then maybe talk a little bit about your wonderful last movie. I know that we haven't gotten there yet. You have so much to say, and it's absolutely fascinating. So Isabel, if we could see this very short clip from Some More Rice.
Forgive me if I dare to reframe your film. At the end, the samurai say that farmers are the winners. They can continue their cycle of replanting and harvesting. Their rice lifestyle lives on, just like the farmers in my home village. Please watch your film again, Maestro Kurosawa, wherever you are. The victory in your film belongs to the culture of farmers from all over the world, Mr. Kurosawa.
I really wanted to show this one because of the possibilities of what you're suggesting, but also how you mediate it through cinema, how you even integrate the archive of cinema into this like call for a coalition in the global South. So if you could speak about this absolutely wonderful film, and then we'll get to the memories of overdevelopment.
Well, in the end of the millennium, about 1998, I decided to move in to the rice terraces and really learn from the indigenous wisdom. And I think it was much, much clearer to me that the world, which has found a kind of a zenith, a kind of a satisfaction level that doesn't make them want to land a man on the moon or outperform a rival nation. This harmony that they have, in the case the rice terraces, which lasted over 3,000 years, is still a living monument. No? We all talk about monuments in the world like the pyramids of Egypt or the Great Wall of China. And these were all built with slave labor by some powerful emperor. But they are now dead monuments. They're just there because they were built thousands of years ago. But those rice terraces that really, I think that if you could imagine Grand Canyon with those stairways to the gods, have just been built out of sheer survival for the people who had to plant and harvest. And today, 3,000 years later, they're still planting and harvesting and using those rice terraces. And we have so much to learn from them. So by staying with them, I think I also began to have an inner understanding of why the slave of Magellan could have been the perfect guide to bring his master across the Pacific Ocean. In other words, originally, I might have had a romantic notion. Oh wow, why can't we be like these people who don't have too many wants, don't have to destroy their environment because they have enough. And this is a juxtaposition to that insatiable drive that makes people keep earning more to buy more. Okay, that's a cliche, but anyway, I think it was learning from that side of life, and I think that was so much wisdom that I absorbed by being with them that allows me today to speak a little bit more, with more authority, and that's the wrong word. With the more having experienced it, and I can even talk to the young Ifugao tribe people there because they respect me, and all I say is, "Why are you ashamed to wear your loincloth?" Just because all the images of Hollywood films or maybe the superheroes they're all super dressed in their heavy wear, and all you need really is a loincloth in the tropics. I have a very funny scene that I have almost done but not yet done. Here at the Palacio Cristal, I also included Jose Rizal. Jose Rizal is our national hero, and he was living here in Madrid about the time when the Palacio Cristal was built. And he saw that they had imported flora and fauna from the Philippines for exhibition, and they had also brought in the indigenous people. And this got Rizal very angry. And so he said, "Why are you treating us like a human zoo?" And which in my narrative, he started to make his novel, which was a very strong critique of the colonialism. But this frame, I think, is important because, when we look at how the world is out of balance, and that at home, we're still convincing those people with that old lifestyle and old wisdom that they have to be like the New Yorkers and the Madrileños and give up their simple way of living. And I think there's already this whole myth. That's why people migrate to America or to Spain, because the material drive has become the benevolent assassination. It has already sunk in, and it has become an important goal. So I could only now tell those young boys and young girls in the village, hey, if we need only for tropical weather this kind of wear, why do we have to import the Western coat and tie? Okay, I was going back to Rizal. Rizal, if you go to any school, elementary school all over the Philippines, there's always a statue of Rizal. And Rizal is always depicted in his, we call it Americana, which is the suit. And there was one of our historians wrote a book, what's underneath the overcoat? Because Rizal is always depicted in this winter coat. So I have this little scene where it's the dismissal and all the children are running already out the gate. And then there's this one child carrying his backpack with his heavy books. And then as he's passing by the bus, he hears psst, 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 psst. And he looks up and there's Sir saying, oi, oi, hey, little boy. Tell your teachers I'm dying in this winter coat. Why don't you get me a bahag, a loincloth like that of Lapu-Lapu? Just to make people rethink why we are trying so hard to wear uncomfortable emperor's clothes. Just to be like that. And so this is all the contradictions that I might have faced also as a artist who had to get out of my cocoon. And maybe that also is why my film about Magellan slave was more a tribute to the indigenous people whose cosmic knowledge or cosmology helped Magellan discover or help Magellan at least get his expedition to that point where it was going to prove the world was round. Of course, the hero in my film is the slave,
Right.
who is the first person to go around the world.
Kidlat, on that note, and just to recommend everyone, the film is going to be released. It's Balikbayan #1, Memories of Overdevelopment, Redux 4, 5. So we could talk to you forever. You have wonderful things to tell us. Your films are incredibly complex and layers. Please just run and go see them. Run to the Palacio de Cristal. And we have to stop it here, unfortunately. Kidlat, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you with us. Enjoy your stay in Madrid and congratulations on your show. Bye-bye.